Well, I'm the third presenter, so I get to introduce myself. And again, you've already seen me this morning. And just want to remind folks our format. There's been a few people that have walked in here at 1310 Anthony and a few other people that have joined Zoom since the last presenter. Every presenter gets 10 minutes. We're timing those presentations. We're then facilitating those questions so that everybody, we're having both the folks in Zoom and the folks here in the room get a chance to ask questions. We probably only have time for like 2 questions, but it's gone okay so far. I'm happy that it's working the way it's working. So, and just wanted to check in with our IT folks. Sound quality, everything's good?
Yeah, just don't bounce on that. So don't ask not to bounce on the thing because it does.
Don't bounce near the podium. Okay, all right.
Or hit on the podium because it does echo.
Okay, all right. So that's a good reminder here. So again, I'm Rich Pirog. I'm the director of the Center for Regional Food Systems. What I'm going to do is give a very brief overview of the center and then talk about one aspect of our work, an emerging aspect of our work, the idea and the concept of how a network of networks could help address more complex food system problems here in Michigan and perhaps regionally and nationally. So, so here I go. So about the center, very briefly, the center was established in 2012. It is a university-wide center. It was formerly the CS Mott Group for Sustainable Food Systems, led by Dr. Mike Ham, who also was the first director of the center. I became director in January of this year. Our mission is developing regionally integrated sustainable food systems. In context, we do work here in Michigan, yes, and it's a big part of our work, but we work nationally, but we also have a growing international program. When we look at our work and sort of the gamut of our work, and I'm not going to go deep into any of this today because of the time and also because I want to talk about this idea of a network of networks. But we do a lot of work in Michigan, and that Michigan work is grounded in the Michigan Good Food Charter, which I'll talk about just a little bit more. But it is a policy framework for good food, healthy, green, fair, and affordable food in Michigan. We do work in food access and health, and sort of arising out of that more recently, healthy food financing with the Michigan Good Food Fund, along with a number of other partners across the state, including Fair Food Network, the Kellogg Foundation, and a CDFI called Capital Impact Partners. We have a very visible program in farm to institution and farm to school, and growing program in early childhood education, and that's also very well connected at the national level. And we work in food hubs and regional food supply chains. We have about 10 academic specialists at the center, 10 to 12 academic specialists, depending on how you count your FTEs. And all of us work in outreach and also some research in all of these areas. Food systems planning and food policy, particularly food policy councils, beginning farmers. There's a beginning farmer grant that's led by the Student Organic Farm, Mike Ham, and one of our partner organizations, Michigan Food and Farming Systems, organic ag production and marketing, and we have a very good relationship, a close relationship with MSU, the Student Organic Farm, and there's a lot of work parallel to and synergized work that we're trying to do, and we hope to do more as we do our own strategic planning and the farm does their strategic planning. And last but not least, and adding this an international dimension to our work, we have one of our staff that has historically for the last several years worked in Africa, but we also are developing a work in city regions and looking at how meta cities, how are they going to feed themselves, and looking at regional food in a global context. And so we hope to continue to grow that program, working with other partners like GCFSI, and I don't have enough time to explain all these letters mean here, but we have a number of partners here and at other locations as well to try to grow that program, as well as our work in Michigan and our national program. We work very closely with MSU Extension, the Product Center, a number of the folks that are on the dais, the presentation here today are folks we've had some interaction with. So the Good Food Charter is really this policy framework for good food. By good food we mean, and I know a lot of folks in the audience already know this, but we're setting the context. it's more of an idea. This is a journey. It's not a destination. This isn't like, it's different in that the charter is not a project as it is a set of bold ideas and a way to get people to be able to work together more collectively. It's a way to create a collaboration infrastructure for systems change towards healthier food in the state of Michigan. And so when we say affordable, fair, green, and healthy, each of those terms are very powerful. We don't measure them, but they're very powerful. And fair in particular, I just want to point out, fair is when nobody's exploited across the whole food supply chain, and it has also given us a chance to start to both do internally and hopefully more externally, more work around structural racism and racial equity. The charter has 6 goals around economic impact, food access and health, nutrition, food systems education, and 25 agenda priorities. And there are many organizations, and the charter was in 2010 when it was created, many organizations came together to create those goals. It wasn't just the Center for Regional Food Systems. Did I say something inappropriate before that? Like, did I say Leopold Center? I'm sorry. I just did. But I was thinking back what I said. And my staff always give me a hard time because even though it's been 6 years since I've been in Iowa, sometimes something from Iowa just comes out and I say it, and so I apologize. I shouldn't do it here. But we have a steering team that has meets 5 times a year. That there's at least 15, 20 organizations involved in them that are involved in championing one or more of those goals of the charter, and everybody is trying to work together. And that idea of a collaboration infrastructure is really critically important. It's not just about doing projects, because projects are only as good as the collaboration and the networks that are involved. And so that leads me to sort of this idea about how we've come to realize how important networks are at the center, because we can't really do our Michigan work unless there really are robust, high-capacity networks and really strong relationships built on trust. And you might think, well, you've seen one network, you've seen every network, right? They're all the same. And I would beg to differ. If you would watch that Capital One commercial where the credit card and they say, "What's in your wallet?" I would challenge you to ask yourself and your own organizations that you work with, what's in your network? What is making your network function, and is it really helping you move towards systems change? So I had the privilege years ago to work with a researcher named Paul Vandeventer and his associates when I was in Iowa, and Vandeventer characterized a set of typologies for networks. And I'm just going to mention these 3 because I think it's really powerful. You'll see your own networks in here. He talked about cooperating networks, and he characterized them by their level of risk and their chance for systemic change. And cooperating networks, these are the ones we all belong to. They're easy, they model best practices, we share information, and it's great. We want cooperating networks, but there's very low risk and there's very little chance for systemic change in cooperating networks. The next level is coordinating networks. You push established organizational boundaries in these networks. You engage in more mutual activities that require trust. You trust another organization to help carry your message, and you're doing something together. And that involves, it takes time to do that. These have a moderate level of risk and a moderate chance of systemic change. And there are some of these in Michigan. The tough ones are collaborating networks, and there's not a lot of these. Collaborating networks are networks that have methods in place to resolve conflicts. Think about your own networks. How many of your networks have procedures and policies in place to resolve conflicts? How many of you pursue long-term system change? How many networks share employees across 5 to 10 organizations so that person represents the network? It doesn't represent some organization, it represents the network. These are tougher things for organizations to do for a lot of reasons, funding reasons and others. And this is the highest risk, but this is the best shot that you're going to have for systemic change when you're using networks. So what we're trying to do at the Center for Regional Food Systems, we need all 3 types of networks, but we want to see us move towards more coordinating and collaborating networks, not only ones that we facilitate, but ones that exist in the state. Did you already give me my 5 minutes?
No.
Okay, I'm doing good. All right. So over the last several years, we have, with grant funding from Kellogg, from the Kresge Foundation, and other sources, we've developed 4 networks that we're co-convening or leading. And very briefly about those 4. And again, just want to remind you, this is just an aspect of our work. Our work isn't just about networks, but it is an important part, particularly in Michigan, as we're trying to reach these goals of the Good Food Charter. The oldest is the Food Hub Network. In the audience here know Balachek and myself from the center, and we have a consultant that works with us. We try to create a learning community across hubs. We send hubs to a certified food hub manager school. We do all kinds of things. We go around the state. They're sort of like Chautauqua type meetings in the sense that we always honor local learning wherever we go. What's happening in Detroit? What's happening in Battle Creek? What's happening in Albion? You know, and we honor that as well as what's happening at the state and national level. The Farm and Institutional Network, led by Colleen Batts, and also on our staff, Abby Harper, worked on, looks at institutional markets, both in hospitals, colleges, and universities, as well as schools. And how do we get more healthy Michigan food into these institutions? How do we do this in a way that's win-win? And we mean by good food, too, not just any food, but good food, healthy, fair, affordable, and green. Meat Network is fairly new, looking at supply chains for smaller and mid-sized producers and processors. And again, using this basic relationship, basic idea of convening during webinars, having a listserv, but also trying to not just do our project work, but to lift up what other people are doing. And last but not least is the Local Food Council Network, which is the newest of these. There's currently 16 councils active in the state of Michigan, urban councils like the Detroit Food Policy Councils, and more rural councils like Lake County that are starting to develop. And we see this is an example. You're kicking at me. So I got what, 1 minute?
No.
I'm not good. I'm good. Okay.
Yeah.
So we are with these councils. They're both urban and rural, and we just closed an RFP with Kellogg funding for seed grants to help build capacity of existing and hopefully create more councils in the state. All of this, the other thing I just want to mention briefly is a part of our work of building and co-creating networks is this idea of shared measurement. The idea that as we collect data, and you heard both Jeff and Ron talk about how important it is to have good data. What if we could really in the state have enough trust across organizations and enough cooperation that we use the same methodology across a number of projects and a number of organizations, and so we can add up that data at the state level in certain ways and make even more compelling case to the state for investment in these kinds of businesses and these kinds of initiatives. It takes a lot to make that happen. As Ben and Vetter talked about, it takes collaborating networks to make that happen. So I'm not sure we're coordinating or collaborating where we would fit in the typology, but we're trying to move more towards higher risk, more systemic change type networks within these 4. So where are we heading? About 2 weeks ago, we convened 21 statewide networks and associations in the food systems, placemaking, and health space for 2.5 hours. And part of the reason we convened them is because they're also part of this whole idea and framework of what we're trying to accomplish in good food, from the breastfeeding network to the land use association to they're all part of this, and they all need to be part of the conversation and the dialogue. It's really tough though, this idea of, when you start having networks of networks of networks of networks, and you get to the point where you're just trying to build grains of sand and they fall, it doesn't work. So we're looking at how we can be more effective, perhaps within our networks, be better leaders, build capacity, and learn how to do that across networks. That's what came out of this first statewide convening. And those 21 networks are certainly not all the networks we need to be touching. It was just a start. So here's where we want to go. This is part of our vision at the Center for Regional Food System, of the idea of a network of networks, where if you see it in the middle part, the colored part of the hubs, and back to the room here, I think the folks on Zoom are they're looking a lot closer at this, but is the food system. production, processing, distribution, retail. It's all the local, state, and federal organizations doing policy. It's the community, health, and faith-based and other organizations. And that's the food system. And then we're trying to realize goals with the charter. And we're just trying to use shared measurement to be able to make a more compelling case by doing good science and good data collection. We have partners, lots of partners. We work very closely with MSU Extension. We work closely with the Product Center. They're doing great project work. They're doing great work on helping individuals make a living, be profitable. These other networks help folks be able to connect and make this work. And we want to connect with other networks, both within the state, like for example, food hubs and kitchen incubators are like salt and pepper, and your left shoe and your right shoe. You know, they work together. We're finding that we need to be, some of our networks, farm institution and food hubs need to be working closer together. Meat and food hubs need to be working closer together. So we have opportunities to do that. We want to make sure there's financial assistance like the Good Food Fund and things like Double Up Food Bucks. And lastly, I'll just end you. This is sort of our tagline for where we want to go with the network of networks. We want it to connect to new and deepen existing networks, accelerate viable growth of equitable regional good food value chains in the state of Michigan. Thank you. And the second question, which looks like it comes from Julia's doppelganger, but I think it's the same person. When you build networks, you often have people closer to the core of the network and others in the periphery. How do you measure the efficacy of the network that you have built? One of the tools that we could offer to when we do an annual event on network capacity is network mapping. Who really are your core partners? Who are the peripheral partners? How do they leverage each other? We could do that. That's the kind of tool and training we could offer in building more effective networks. Those are my two questions. Thank you very much. And I've got to introduce the next person.